All right. So what I'm going to do is hop on this wheel. I'm going to wet it down a little bit. I'm not going to put a lake on here, but just a little moisture right there so that this will stick. I also wet this down. Okay, this is how you handle any kind of trimming, right? So I'm going to put this down here. I'm using the nearest ridge to help center. I kind of swivel it around like this to catch some air under it. And I see one little bump over here I don't like. You got to be, you want to get near perfect on this. If you start out and it's wobbling, when you trim it, it's going to be right way off. Okay, so that's better. Not too much of a wobble there. All right. Now, I don't want to put so much water on here, but I just want to kind of wet the surface down. So you can see, it's not dripping wet or anything. Okay, I'm going to use this trim tool. This happens to be my favorite, but there's lots of other ones too, you guys. These you could use for trimming, or this, just depends. But I like this one the best. No matter what, I'm using the tools that have the flat wire and not a rounded, so it carves better. Okay, so I'm going to start by getting this trimmed down how I want it to be, and I don't want to touch this too much because remember, this is what I measured to set inside of the rim of the other. So if I'm messing around with that, then it's going to affect how it fits in the vessel. So I start in the center and just kind of scrape out. I left extra clay in the bottom right here so I could trim it how I wanted. Okay, and keep checking. You can hear that's kind of hollow already, so I don't want to take off too much because I threw it kind of thin. If you're thicker, remember it sounds more like that. If you need to take off a bunch of clay really quickly, you can use this guy, the small part of this. This also will help even it out too. If you've got a big ridge or something that keeps catching the tool, you can kind of give it a better surface area to trim across. I don't want to take any more from there because I do need that to be sturdy. You'll see why. I'm pretty good. All right, now what I'm going to do is I've come over with a little round ball of clay that I kind of wedged, and that's going to be my knob eventually. So I'm going to just give this a little scoring just so it sticks. I'm going to just put a little finger amount of water there just to help it, but not so much that this slides all over. I need this to withstand some pushing on it. So that's why I don't want to get that too thin. And it's also why it's important to get this at the right drying time. So I'm going to shove that down there. And what you're going to do is center that. Okay, just like you would a normal thing. Only you're just going to use like your little bitty fingertips. Okay, so I want to get some moisture on there. But again, you don't want to flood the area. So I'm using my thumbs to press down, but just only my fingertips are what's around the side. And I still have my elbows down. I'm still in that position where I would normally be to center. I'm just centering such a small amount of clay, I can't wrap my hands around it. It's just my fingers and my thumbs that are acting like that. It's going to take some practice. Remember, like anything else, I make this look super simple and really easy, and it's not. What I really want to do, see here how I'm going to take my finger over this area and kind of run that back and forth just to ensure a good solid joining of the clay right there. All right. If you feel your fingers start to stick, get a little more moisture on them, but not too much. Now, any good knob is going to have a good place for people to hold to pick it up. So you kind of need to provide a little overhang, and it needs to be big enough. It can't be this tiny little thing because that's not a very grabbable knob. So what I'm doing right now is I'm condensing that in. And you can see the top's a little off center, but I'll remove that later. Okay, now your knot can look like anything. I'm going to go ahead and center this part now that this is up top, just by using my fingers. This knob isn't a really successful knob because there's nothing to grab onto. So let me show you how to work this. So I'm going to hit that again right there. I'm actually going to smush that down a little bit. Look how my hands are touching each other as much as possible. That provides stability. So yeah, that's a little off. I'm just going to trim that right off with my needle tool. This knob is quite tall. I don't know that I'm in love with that, so I'm going to try to push that down a little bit. So it can be small, it can be larger. If you want it to be, you can have it like that there. Got a little air pocket. I have to trim that off. So, work it how you want it to be, but don't overwork it. And make sure it matches the lid. So I'm going to run my sponge around the rim of that so it's nice and soft. And that's my little handle. It's got a little overhang, and it's got something that I can grab onto. Okay, and there is that. Now, this is going to be hard to get off because it's really stuck. So one thing that you can do, if you're careful, you can try to get it off like that. But because it's such that leather hard state, one thing you can do if you're really careful is if you take one of the thin, whether the rectangle or this, and you just slide that under a little bit, that gets enough air under that you can release that better. Don't pick it up with it because you'll put a notch in it. So one last thing would be to flip this over. I want to clean this up a bit since it's been sitting on that metal. And then also, just for added insurance, I'm going to take this needle tool and poke down in the center there. That's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things for aesthetics or how it looks, but what that does is, in case I trapped any air in between the two of those things, that's going to be a little release for it so it doesn't pop off in the kiln or something. Okay, there's that. Now, this lid, the last phase of this is you've got to be really careful. You don't want to just set this out and be like, I'm done. This and this have to dry really slowly and come together a little bit better because this is wet and this is not as wet. So cover this with a bag for several days and so it dries really slowly and together. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. That's all.